Are you videoing her?
She wants me to.
Good. Morning, good afternoon, evening.
Okay. All right. Is this on? I don't want to turn it up too high. Or if maybe I didn't turn it on at all. Is it on? Yeah, it's okay. It's on.
Ask if everybody can hear you.
Testing. All right. So my name is Erica. I am the owner of Serene Green Tropicals. It's a small plant boutique inside the Common Grounds, not too far from here. And I'm also the director of Plant Life Pop-Up, which is a multi-vendor plant sale that we host almost monthly. We've got anywhere between 10 and 30 vendors that come and sell all plants, plants, accessories, pottery, stuff like that. So that's kind of who I am. I'm not a public speaker, so I will say that right now. So I would like this to be more interactive. If you guys have any questions about your plants, if I'm talking about a subject that you might maybe have a question on, please ask, because I'd like some interaction. That's picture one of my shop, the one side of my shop. So I'm gonna start off with kind of the main common issues. Now, I'm not like professionally trained. This is all from my personal experience, which I think is really the best way to learn. Somebody once told me that there is no failure, there's only an opportunity to learn. So if you have a plant and you killed it, try it again. You learned what you did to kill it probably, and now next time maybe you'll get it right. And that's pretty much my journey. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've learned a lot because of it. So the main issues, I'll kind of give an overview. The main issues of plant issues, houseplant issues, is underwatering, overwatering, humidity issues, and bugs. So those are the main things that I'm going to talk about. Light can also be an issue. A lot of plants will tolerate a variety of lights, but direct sunlight sometimes is a big problem for plants. It'll burn them, and then sometimes no sunlight can also be a problem because so that is another issue. My whole house is a grow light, so I just have grow lights everywhere. So it's really like dialed down and, and it's very specified, so I don't have to worry about Ohio's lack of light or too much sun. Underwatering is a pretty easy one to figure out. Your leaves start to turn yellow. A lot of times your plants will droop. You'll end up with dehydrated leaves like this one right here. So this is a severely dehydrated plant. I ended up soaking it for a couple hours, let it absorb, because what happens is eventually water won't absorb back into that soil. The soil often becomes hydrophobic, so you need to give it a really good soak if it's still savable. Sometimes you wait too long. I've had some stuff get shifted to the back of the greenhouse and I didn't see it, and they just, they don't make it. This is another sign of underwatering. The bottom leaves will start to turn yellow. When you water it, a lot of times the plant will perk up. Unfortunately, the yellow leaves can't be saved, you just cut them off. With underwatering, the problem with underwatering on a regular basis is the plants start to dehydrate, the roots dehydrate, and then they don't have the ability to absorb the water back in afterwards. And usually that's what's the final death of a plant from underwatering, is it's just, even though you've watered it, those roots are now dehydrated and they don't have the ability to absorb the water. Figuring out when your plant needs water, it's a form of communication. Peace lilies are an excellent one to start with if you're wanting to learn communication with your plant. They are very dramatic. They're going to completely wilt when they're slightly underwatered. You water it, they perk right back up. So they're an easy one to start to learn. A lot of people will keep them with their plant collections just as an indicator when they're supposed to water, because the peace lily will be very obviously dramatic about the water issue. So next issue is when you're inconsistently watering. When you're going too long in between waterings, or you water a little bit too often, you end up with edema. So edema is basically your plant absorbs too much water all at once and it doesn't know what to do with, and it basically the cells of your plant then burst. So if you start to see, it's like a translucent type thing on your plant. Does not mean that your plant is dying. It does not mean that it has a disease. It just means that it didn't know what to do with the water, and it caused this issue right up here. You can see it, and walk in front of this again. So you can see that right around here. So this one has burst cells within the leaf That leaf is not salvageable, but the rest of your plant more than likely will be completely fine. That often happens also if you water and the plant gets too cold. For some reason, that does seem to affect the plant, and the edema can occur. The next issue, and this is really one of the big ones that people have a hard time recognizing, is root rot. And I hope that's the next picture. Oh, no, we're gonna go to, yep, here we go. So this is a situation of root rot. So my first clue is the yellowing leaves. So the yellowing leaves could be a sign of underwatering, because you have leaves that turn yellow when you don't water, but then you also have leaves turn yellow when there's too much water. The thing that's the difference between the two is you're not going to see new growth on a plant that has root rot. You're going to see the yellowing, and you're going to realize, hey, my plant hasn't grown in quite some time. An example of that are these two plants. These two plants are seed grown. They were both grown from the same seed stock. They should be the same size. This plant is healthy. You can see its roots through the pot. They're nice bright white roots, no problems there. This one wasn't growing. I was getting some yellowing on it. So I pull it out of the pot and all the roots are rotten. For some reason, this particular one, they were getting the same treatment, but some reason this one responded poorly where this one did fine. And that's the other thing that I was gonna say earlier, is that we're taking tropical plants, we're bringing them into Ohio, and we're forcing them into our home environment, which is not their environment. A lot of times you can keep a wonderfully happy house plant, but you're gonna encounter a plant sometimes that just refuses to cooperate no matter what you do, even if you're doing it right. It's just, sometimes they just don't make it. And sometimes it's not you, sometimes it's the plant. So what I did with this one is I took it out of the pot, and then the next picture hopefully is the root rot. So this is what you're gonna see with root rot. So you've got some healthy roots right here. So you can see these ones are nice. They're nice and bright and white, and they're firm when you push on them. You can squish them, and if there's no squish to them, it's a good healthy root. Now if you pull it up and you're gonna see some of this is a rotten root. It's gonna be mushy. If it's like advanced stages, it's gonna smell like rot. You're gonna have like a smell to it. And what it is it's almost like, it's basically a fungal disease. So when you have overwatering and the plant does not have a chance to dry out, sits there in that wet, it's gonna rot. It can also happen when your soil is entirely too dense for the plant. So what happens is that root doesn't have the opportunity to absorb any oxygen because there's no pockets for it to breathe from. So it also, then you end up with the rot. The problem with rot is because it is a type of fungal issue or bacterial issue, it spreads. So you can clean off, let's say right here, you can see this one right here. It's just starting to rot on that one. You can trim that little section off, but if there's any of that left, it's going to continue spreading throughout the plant. It's going to eventually reach the base of your plant, and your plant's just going to rot out. You see it a lot in sansevieras, the snake plants or the mother-in-law plants. Those are they do not like a lot of water, and you do notice if you overwater, you get the leaves start to, at the base, they start to rot out. It started from the roots and it traveled straight up that plant. So what you're gonna wanna do, you're gonna wanna cut off anything that looks rotten. Trim up into the good root. Trim, like for this particular one, trim all the way up into here. It's not gonna hurt the root, and you're gonna prevent it from spreading. And you wanna cut off anything that's even remotely like that. A lot of times when you pull it out, that outside part will pull off, and it's going to leave this part. As long as it's not rotten, I trim them off because they're not doing anything. It's just pointless to have it on there. It's no longer functioning for the plant, but I trim it off just so it's not a big mess in there. But if it's white and not smushy, it can stay there. It's just easier sometimes when you're cleaning it off just to cut it all off. After you deal with the rot, you trim all of this off. Then you're going to want to rinse the plant off really well in the sink and use tap water. And then the next slide should show another bug. So we're going to go back to those. Maybe I didn't put it here. There should be one unless I didn't include it. Looks like I didn't include the picture. So basically what I then do is I rinse off the plant really well. And then I coat it. You can use cinnamon. Cinnamon is an antifungal. It's going to help it from not spreading. So you can use cinnamon. Some people use bleach. I'm not a fan of bleach. There's a lot of methods that you can use. You kind of just have to figure what works best for you. For me, I do like cinnamon if it's available, but I generally use a rooting hormone because it does have an antifungal property in it, and it also encourages new plant root growth. So it's encouraging that plant to regrow. This one right here, rather than putting it back in the soil, there was no roots to it. Put it back in the soil's going to do it no good. It's not going to be able to absorb any of the nutrients from that soil because there's no roots to do it. Chances are it would probably then, the rest of it would rot out. What I do is I take a good sphagnum moss, and you can do it in a cup, you can do it like a little Dixie cup, you can do it in a Tupperware container. I just happened to do it this way because I wanted to keep it with this one next to it. So wrap the base of it around. I'll show you how I do that here. So I wrap the base of, essentially it's a node, the part that the root grows out of. So I wrap it with a sphagnum moss that I keep damp, and then I put the plastic wrap around it just to kind of keep it moist and to keep that sphagnum moss from growing all over the place. But you can see here, there's 0 roots left to this plant. There's nothing left. And I, as of yet, am not getting any new root growth down here, but I am starting to get a little bit up high. So that is, it's going to take this one a while to reroot. So I'm just going to keep it in this little ball for a while, and then eventually it will start to develop roots. Once it has roots, that's when I'll plant it back in its soil. You do not want to use the same soil that you used. It has that fungal disease in the soil. You can bake it. I've heard of people baking their soil. If you really want to save it, you can do that. I don't, because now you're baking out the nutrients that's in the soil as well. I just pitch it. One of the big reasons plants rot is, like I said before, the soil's entirely too dense. So here's an example. It's a classic potting mix, and that's a really heavy peat moss base. So it's dense. You can see that there's like not a lot of, it's dense. So you water it and it stays a little bit waterlogged. It doesn't give the chance to breathe. The roots can't breathe as well. What I like to use, and this is, for me, I do a lot of the more rare plants and stuff like that. So your basic house plant's not necessarily going to need something super high end as far as like an aeroid mix is what I use. You can use a potting soil. Certain mainstream potting soils do carry fungal gnats in the soil. So if you notice that you have a ton of fungal gnats in your house, then it's generally a specific brand that's causing it. Yes. So sometimes you also get a plant from the store full of fungal gnats. Yes. Fungal, there's a product, if you guys are interested, I can show you to you. It's on Amazon. There's a product that's super, super good for fungal gnats. It's just a drop you put in your water, and it kills all the eggs out of it. Are you? I'll show you. There's a good one on Amazon. You don't do Amazon? I'm not sure if there's any local. So it's one of the products actually I'd like to get into my shop just because it's a really, really good product for fungus gnats. But the soil mix that I use on my personal plants, try to not make a mess all over their table, is heavy on the perlite. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's also large chunks of cocoa bark in there. There is no actual soil in my mix. I don't use dirt. I don't use a potting soil. I don't have anything that's actually like the dirt that, is in the ground. A lot of tropicals will grow in the ground, but they're going to grow more in the peaty, limey stuff, the decomposed material on the top of the forest floors in the jungle. These particular ones are mostly going to grow on the sides of trees. They'll start at the base of the tree and they're going to travel up. So they don't really need a dirt. What my mix is it's, like I said, a cocoa bark, cocoa core, worm castings. So that's the soil base that I use with the nutrients, and perlite. If you want to use a standard potting soil, you can. It will be beneficial to your plant if you're repotting it to add an extra amount of perlite to it to fluff up that soil a little bit. So you don't have to use a high-end mix, just add a lot of extra perlite. If you have orchid bark is excellent to add to your soil because that gives it that more airy, it retains water, but it also allows those roots to grow and to breathe. So the next major issue is bugs. Bugs happen. When I first started getting into houseplants, I found out about how many pests can kill your plants, and I started to panic. Spider mites was the one that really, really scared me because you end up with spider mites and they can run rampant through your collection and they can just kill all of your houseplants relatively quickly. We'll get to the pictures here. Okay, so we can start with any of the bugs. So this one here is spider mite damage. So basically it's a sap sucker. It sucks all of that sap right out of that plant, and it leaves these weird little speckle marks that you can see right over here. So this is a super, actually this is a really advanced stage of spider mite damage, but you can see that there are just these like light speckle marks that don't necessarily match the original color of that green. The other way that you can tell that your plant has spider mites is this webbing. It's not going to be like a spider web, you're webbing. You're not going to see like the fine lines where the spider wove it. It's going to be like a really fine, almost a mesh, because you're not going to see it like a spider. You can tell the difference when you look at it. It's going to be almost it's not solid because you can see through it, but it's not going to be the fine webbing. And then in this one, you can actually also see the spider mites in it. Those little dots, those would be also the bug. They're very, usually it's very hard to see them with your bare eye. My eyes are starting to go, so I'm having a harder and harder time seeing them now. Magnifying glasses sometimes help. Having a loupe, a jeweler's loupe or something like that will help as well. A lot of pests can be dealt with chemicals. Bonide makes a lot of really good product. They have they have a mite spray, a systemic spray. You can use neem oil if you want to use something slightly more natural. Neem works on these as well. The issue with spider mites is they become immune. So you want to rotate. So if you're using a neem, they're going to build up a resistance to neem. So use neem one time, use a dish soap next time, a mild dish soap. Just let it sit for a couple minutes and rinse it off. Next time, use an insecticide. I love granular systemic in the soil. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with spider mites. Works for almost every other pet, but not unfortunately with spider mites. So you're just going to want to keep keeping that clean. So you're going to treat your plant, wash it off, wait 5 to 6 weeks, do it again. So you're going to want to wash it a few times. You're going to want to continue treating it a few times because those spider mites are going to infest the soil. They're going to lay their eggs or whatever they do, and then you're going to have a cycle. So you got to break the cycle. So that's one of the problems, that you often buy a plant from the garden center with spider mites. It's not uncommon to buy something and have it from like big box stores and stuff that maybe aren't keeping as close of an eye as maybe some like larger nurseries that they specialize in that. The next pest, let's see what comes up next, is thrip. Thrip also cause obvious damage. They're not going to show the damage as quickly as spider mites, but what you're going to see is it's almost going to look slightly like a burn, and you're going to see it on the underside of the leaf before you see it above the leaf. And it just looks like a tannish, slightly toasted looking. It's not going to look actually crunchy, but it just has like a toasty look, like a finely toasted piece of toast when you pull it out before it fully gets toasted. That's what it's going to look like. It's just going to have like a darker look to it. The thrip themselves, you can see with your naked eye, but they're very small. They basically look like itty bitty grains of rice. So it's going to have an elongated shape, and these ones you'll be able to see move. The spider mites you can't see move. They barely move at all. These ones, if you just tap a little, take your fingernail and just tap the sec next to it, you'll be able to see it walk. Same treatment. This one, systemic granules work for them, which is awesome. So this one you can double hit. Let's put the systemic granule in the soil, and then what happens is that plant absorbs it into its leaves, and then when the the thrip bite into that leaf, it kills them. And then the spray is going to kill any of the living ones that are on the plant. So spray it, add the systemic, the name went right out of my head. Add the systemic to it, and you're hitting it from 2 fronts. And again, continue treating it. I think you add the systemic every 6 weeks, whatever it says on the bottle. Just keep reapplying it until you notice that you have a long period of time. You want to wait probably 3 months, keeping a really close eye on it. Both of those do spread pretty rapidly through your plants. If you have a plant with spider mites, or if you have a plant with thrip, take it and move it to an area of your house where you have no other house plants, so that your other house plants do not become infected. If you have it and you notice that you have spikes, thrip, or spider mites, and if it is sitting there and it is like right next to another plant, treat the other plant too, because the chances are it's probably spread. The next two ones don't spread as rapidly, and they don't cause as much visible damage. This one is scale. Scale are going to be like little hard shells on the stem of your plant and usually on the back of the plant leaf. You don't see it too often on the top of the leaf, but you can. And you can pop these off with your fingernail. They're kind of gross. And you can definitely see them. I actually saw one. I had somebody ask me to look at one of their fiddle leaf figs. It was the biggest scale I've ever seen in my life. They were about that big around. I did not know they got that big. It was awful. These ones you can manually scrape off if you choose to. I had a cactus once that had it really thick outside. I just took a butter knife and I literally just scraped it down off the side, added the systemic granule, and I also treated it with a systemic spray, and then rotated that out with neem as well. These ones you're not going to see damage on your plant nearly as quickly as you are with the other two, but they will eventually kill your plant if they become, overrun. The next one, yeah. The scale can move from plant to plant, but it's not going to spread as quickly as spider mites or thrip. It's a slower moving bug. I think I have heard, I don't research a ton I have a friend that does this, but I don't research the whole life cycle of the bug. For me, I don't really care. I just want them dead. I mean, I just want them to go away. So where they start and how fast their eggs pupate or whatever they do, that's usually not my concern. My concern is making sure I get the plant cleaned really quickly and then healthy again. The next one's mealybugs. Mealybugs are really common if you're a Hoya collector. Hoyas are very prone to mealybugs. They will also go after syngoniums. They'll go after, variety of bugs. They can spread quickly. If you find them somewhere in your house, you might find them in the next room as well. They don't necessarily travel from plant to plant to plant. They kind of go after the ones they like the most first. So these are going to look like little downy tufts of almost cotton. So it's going to be like a fluffy look. It does develop a little bit of like this weird cocoon-like webbing that you can pull off sometimes. There's a couple ways to kill these. These are actually my favorite ones to treat because they're the easiest ones to get rid of in my opinion. Spray them with alcohol. As soon as you spray them with alcohol, they're dead. You can use a systemic, you can use a neem, anything will kill them. Dip a cotton or a Q-tip or a cotton ball. If it's just a small little plant, dip that in the alcohol and wipe it off and they're gone. That's it. Continue keeping an eye on the plant because they will, like all the other pests, they can come back. But they're, in my opinion, not that bad. As far as signs of them, you're not going to necessarily see leaf damage. You're going to see a massive infestation of them before you see any damage to your plant. They are also a sap sucker. So you could see like a dewy pearlite sticky dew, because they do extract that. The plant then gets scared and it says, oh, I need to get rid of this. I'm going to attract beneficial bugs. They release that sap to pull in beneficial bugs, and that's one of the signs. If you see some of that, there's something usually going on with one of your plants. If you see that downy nectar, or like the sticky nectar. I don't think I have any other slides. Let's see. See if I covered it all.
She's
Got
got
the
it.
bugs. Yes.
Is thrip and whitefly, are those two different?
They are two different things. Yeah, whitefly fly. So if you have, and they're very actually, you can get them outside in your garden as well with the whiteflies. So if you go over your rhododendron, or if you go over to your they're usually like in your annuals, I think. So if they're in your petunias, we had actually a batch of petunias with whitefly. You go over there and you just kind of shake the plant a little bit, and you get all these little white flying things. It's whitefly. Whitefly can infest your plants really quickly. They're a pain in the hiney.
Best way to get rid of them.
Using an insecticide spray. Yeah, you just get a good insecticide spray and spray it down. Whitefly are hard to get rid of. I have not encountered them in my house. I have not heard of anyone really dealing with them with house plants. They can infest greenhouses. I know a greenhouse out of state. They had to close for a couple days because they had to do a mass whitefly pesticide application to their entire greenhouse. And then that is, again, it's a repeat process. So you treat it, you wait a little while, you treat it again. I haven't encountered whitefly myself, thank heavens, except for outside in our garden. And I think we ended up pulling those plants and tossing them, is what we ended up doing. We sprayed it with, I think we treated it with 7.
And neem.
And neem. A 7 and a neem?
Nothing.
No 7, just neem?
No, neem too.
Oh, I guess we double treated it, neem and 7.
It did not get
It didn't get better, so we just pulled the petunias and tossed them. Sometimes that's one of those times where it's just you cut your losses. If it's a plant that's very, very near and dear to your heart, you know, it was your mother's, and you got it from her, and it's very special, fight for it. If it's something you picked up at Mark's for $1.99, sometimes it's easier to pitch it. It just depends on how much you want to save it and how much you want to save your own self time and heartache and stuff like that. Does anybody else have any questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So she has a question about the root rot. She wants to see the picture again. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, what'd you do?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So it depends on how bad the rot is. In this situation with this plant, I cut all that rot off, and a lot of it you can pull off with your hands. Like, it's just gonna come off, and it's just like this mush that's just gonna come off your plant. Just pull that all off. Sometimes a good power spray from your sink will wash a lot of that off. Then trim up into it, get a good pair of clean nippers, spray them with alcohol, cut into the root, get it all cleaned out. And then if you still have a healthy root, you can repot it in new soil. If that has traveled into, like with this one, and you have no roots left, and if that rot starts to go into the plant stem, and you have to cut that stem, let it dry out. Set it outside. You want, we call it callusing. You want that end to callus, because if you leave that open, the bacteria from the soil, I mean, soil's going to have, even great soil is going to have some bacterial properties to it. It'll infect that, and it could develop the rot again. Mm-hmm. So I moisten the sphagnum moss, then I wrap it, and I leave a little bit at the top so I can pour water in there. This one, because I did have to trim into the base of the plant, it wasn't just the roots. I had to cut into the stem of the plant as well. So I actually left a small hole at the bottom of this where the end of the plant was sticking out, so that bottom wasn't in the moist sphagnum moss. Now, there's a lot of different ways to re-root your plant. I'm a sphagnum moss fan. Some people like water. I'm terrible about water rooting. I forget to change the water. It gets gross, and then I end up rotting. Vermiculite's a good one. Vermiculite, perlite. I often use a vermiculite perlite moss mix. Generally, I use also mostly perlite and a sphagnum moss mix myself. Those would be the fungal gnats, and they're a pain in the. They're awful. They fly in your coffee. They fly in your eyes. They look for anything that's wet. Yeah, they fly in your face. You're watching TV and you're going like this as they're flying around your head. Fungal gnats come from moist soil, and again, there's a common known soil mix that everyone I've ever talked to that uses it ends up with fungal gnats. It's just, I don't know why, but it just seems to come with the soil when you buy it. Oftentimes they'll also come from other plants that you buy from a nursery. They are a problem. What they are is they live in the soil. They lay their eggs in the soil. Sometimes if you blow on the top of the pot, you can see them walking around in there from watering. There's a couple ways to get rid of them. You can dehydrate your plant, which is not the best for your plant, but it makes it so that their eggs and stuff like that can't survive because they need to be moist, which is probably why they go after your coffee and your eyeballs, is they're looking for moist areas. So you can dehydrate your plant, let it completely dry out for a couple days in between watering. That's not my favorite method. It's very hard on the plant. My favorite way to do it is to get those yellow sticky things. You can get them on Amazon or any, I think garden centers, grocery stores, I think have them too. They're like these little sticky, some of them are flowers, some of them are arrows. You stick it in the plant and they're drawn towards it, they get stuck to it. So that takes care of the adults. And then I like a product, so you know those mosquito bits that you put in like standing water in your yard? It's like, basically it's a corn cob that's coated in a chemical. So you put this in like your standing water or a little fountain in your yard or something, and there's a chemical called BTI that's coating it. The corn cob itself,
Natural.
is it natural? Oh, apparently it's natural. I did not know this. So it's a natural, not chemical, that that will kill mosquito larvae in your standing water. Now you can make a mosquito bit tea and it smells terrible. You can take those mosquito bits, you can soak them in water, because mosquito bites are easy to get. You can soak them in water for 24 hours and then water with the water from that. Problem with that is it smells, and that corn cob can cause mold on top of your soil. So that's not my favorite way to do it, but it is a way that you can do it. The mold's not going to hurt the plant, it's just a pain, it's just unsightly. My favorite thing is to get just the BTI chemical. I get mine from Amazon. It might be elsewhere. I don't know. I haven't looked around. You add a drop to your gallon of water. You water with it. So I use the sticky traps and that BTI material, chemical, or not chemical. What would you call it if it's not a chemical?
Look, I forget what it is. It's not an actual chemical.
I don't know. Anyway, the fluid that you drop. So that is going to kill any of the larvae that's in your soil, and then these sticky traps will catch anything that's flying around in your. The other thing you can do is just leave your cup of coffee out. Those catch a lot too. If you're a wine drinker, they really like wine. They go after your wine as well. So I have in the past set cups of coffee, black coffee out, and overnight leave my glass of half-drunk wine on the counter, and they'll be full of the fungal gnats. Do they have it? Oh, she just looked it up, and apparently it's showing that Home Depot and Walmart and Ace Hardware, it's showing they also have BTI. I haven't looked there, but if they do, that'd be great, because it's an amazing product. I highly recommend it. So that's in my experience the best way to get rid of the fungal gnats. They're going to be a lot smaller than a fruit fly. I've tried the traditional fruit fly traps with the apple cider vinegar and stuff like that. The fungal gnats don't seem to be drawn towards it. The other thing you can do is get carnivorous plants. Carnivorous plants love and attract the fungal gnats. You stick a couple plants around your house, and they will help control your pest population.
Have you tried the hydrogen peroxide?
I haven't personally tried the hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide, as we know, if anybody's ever used it, can burn. I read once about a tooth whitening DIY thing where you put baking soda and hydrogen peroxide on your teeth. It hurt. My gums hurt. I don't want to do that to my plants. You can. I haven't used it, and this is circling back to there's a lot of different methods, and you just have to find out what works for you. For me, the BTI I liked. People have also, I've heard, water with a diluted bleach. Again, I haven't done that because if I don't want it on me, I probably don't want it on my plant. I try to do it as close to nature as possible. If I can use beneficial bugs, I'm going to use beneficial bugs. So I will in my shop every so often. We do release beneficials. The beneficial bugs will eat the bad bugs. Ladybugs are an awesome one. You can order them from Nature's Good Guys. Ladybugs will go in and they will tell you if you have a pest, because you'll see a bunch of ladybugs on one plant and they're eating all the bad bugs. If you keep reptiles, don't bring in ladybugs. They're toxic. So I have reptiles, so I don't do the ladybugs anymore. Lacewig are an excellent one, and that's what we use in our shop, is lacewig larvae. You can barely see them. They're very, 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 very tiny, and my friend can see them because she apparently has microscope eyes. I can't see them very well, but they're these little tiny, she calls them little tiny alligators. And she has some videos of them. And they run around, and they grab the mealybug or whatever, and you can see them running away with it in some of her videos. They're really good for control. If you have a current infestation or a current bug problem, don't necessarily rely on the beneficials. You're going to want to hit it with a systemic, hit it with the neem, hit it with the shower. Take it in the shower and spray it down really well. Just get them off the plant. After you get it controlled, then add the beneficials, because it works better that way, and they'll take care of any remnants that's left in the soil or anything like that. So, and you had a question? Okay. Oh. Uh-huh. Yeah. It's an umbrella plant. A Schefflera umbrella plant. Yeah. Have you tried cutting in? Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see. It's a pot of stems, basically. There's no leaves, and there's a small section of green growth down at the bottom. Have you tried cutting into any of the stems at all? I would do a test cut and see if they're even alive. Yeah. So if they're still alive, there's a chance for regrowth. I don't give up on the plant until it's just either crunchy or fluid. It's basically, I mean, if you want to keep it, cut into it. If there's no green in the middle, the stems are dead. Cut it back, and then just that regrowth down at the bottom, they regrow it from that base or that. I think Schefflera sometimes can be a little bit ornery. So they can be ornery with water. I've used them in some of my chameleon tanks, and I struggle with them for some reason. Watering comes down to environment. So there's no one size fits all for that. My house maintains about a 70% humidity. I don't run humidifiers or anything. I just have that many plants. That many are in my house, and it just maintains a lot of humidity. I water my plants about every other week. I just water them when they are almost dry, or sometimes when I'm really busy, too late. It happens. My shop is extremely low humidity. I have 2 humidifiers running, and I still can't get it above 50%. On average, it's around 30%. And we are watering twice a week in the shop because they dry out super, super fast. So it really comes down to your home. You know, how much humidity is it getting? How much light is it getting? How hot is your house and how cold is your house? If your house is really, really, really warm and dry, you're gonna wanna water a lot more than if it was, a nice, comfortable 70 and humid. You're gonna water them a little bit less. So it's hard to say without knowing your exact conditions in your home, but on average, most people, roughly once a week, and it also depends on your soil. This plant I'm going to have to really watch because it's a really heavy peat mix. If peat dries out, it becomes hydrophobic, and it's very hard for the water to get back in that soil. So if you have something that you're watering and you're noticing it's running straight through, and that's not, stick your finger in and it's still bone dry, your water dried out or your soil dried out too much, you need to rehydrate it. The best way to do it, stick it in water, submerge the entire pot in water and poke holes in it. Go through the top of the soil and poke holes. You can use a fork, you can use a finger, you can use a chopstick, but you want to break that up so the water can get back into the plant to hydrate it. But yeah, as far as how often, it just depends on your home. But on average, once a week. So basically, most house plants water them when they're almost halfway dry. You don't want them to dry out all the way to the base. So for this one's actually dry and needs watered because I let it dry out too much. It's been a busy couple weeks. But if I stick my finger to about here and it's dry, I want to water. If I stick my finger to about here and it's wet, I don't want to water yet. Sometimes you can also tell by the weight of the pot. So this pot is extremely light right now. And you just kind of get a feel for it. I can walk around my greenhouse and I can pick up pots and I know what needs water and what doesn't. It just comes along with familiarity. It's like with your dog. You get a new dog, you don't know their habits and stuff like that. You learn them. It's the same with your house plants. You just have to learn them, basically. Mm-hmm. So if the stems are not dead, if there's still some life in the stems, you can cut them down. And that will trigger regrowth in the stem, yeah. So it's basically like propagating a plant or a tree or anything. When you cut it, it stimulates growth and it'll start growing from new sections. So if they're still alive, yeah, you can cut a little bit. I don't know that I'd necessarily cut it all the way down unless you want it to be a shorter, more compact plant. You can do that. I have a begonia at home that got completely out of control. Rather than just trimming it back, I cut it down. I left about that much at the bottom because it was about this tall. And I'm just gonna let it regrow from the bottom so it's a little bit more attractive once it regrows. So if the stems are still alive, just cut a section off and see what happens. If that doesn't do anything, you cut it all the way down and then just allow that new growth to take over the plant. Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked that. So the tips, when your tips turn brown, it's a humidity problem. So if your plant looks awesome, you're still having some growth, but maybe it's slowed down a little bit.
It's beautiful on top.
Mm-hmm.
The other leaves are all
Yes. So what happens, I don't know if any of these have dry tips. They don't. So what'll happen with, if your house is lacking humidity and your plant wants a little bit more humidity, your plant will look fine, except for those tips. The tips will brown up, and that's just, it's just dry. It wants more humidity in the air. If you don't want to run a humidifier, get moist too. Sometimes a plant will just, it can brown at the tip from a bacterial infection in the leaf, but that's not always necessarily on the tip. You're going to see it throughout the leaf as well. It's just the tip. Yeah.
It goes back further.
Okay. Yeah, and it'll eventually take the whole leaf. You can do a couple things to up the humidity. You can get a pebble tray. So just get like a,
I have a lot of active violets.
okay.
And I put custard on it.
Uh-huh. I would do that, yeah. Or you can get like a, she's saying she puts cups of water around her African violets to help with the humidity. That works a lot. I actually have some in my shop. I have little bowls of water with clay, like terracotta, broken terracotta pieces that had gotten washed up in the beach. So they're almost like sea glass, and I found them and I thought they were great. Threw them in there because they absorb water, and then they'll slowly release the water into the air.
Leca.
Leca. Leca. You can use leca too. Leca's a good one. You can do a bowl of leca. That works well because it absorbs water and then it slowly releases it in the environment. The other thing you can do is get a dish of some sort, about yay high, however you want to do it. Fill it with stone, and then you're going to take that. I keep trashing their table over here. You're going to take that plant. You're going to set it on top of the stones. Do you have that? Okay, so you're going to put it on the stone dish. You're going to fill water almost to the top. You don't want the water touching the bottom of the plant. You're going to end up with an over wet plant and root rot. So put that water level just below the plant so it's sitting on the rocks and the water's underneath the rocks, and then it's going to evaporate directly up into your plant. You have a bowl next to it. It helps the surrounding area. You put it on top of it. It's evaporating and hydrating directly underneath of it. Small desk-sized humidifiers help sometimes. Domes. Sometimes if your plant's smaller, you can do a cake dome and put a cake dome over it. That creates a humid environment. Basically, what I was saying before is we're bringing in plants into an environment that's not their environment. So what we want to do is replicate. I had a lady ask me yesterday, she had a banana plant. She wanted to know how she should treat it. She goes, what kind of environment should I give it? I said, well, banana plants grow in the tropics. They grow in Florida. So you want to simulate Florida, basically. If you want a thriving plant and you want it to look as beautiful in your home as it does in its natural habitat, you are going to have to do your best to simulate that environment. Try to be Florida in that spot somehow. So, yeah. Yeah. The stones? Uh-huh. So basically, if this is a dish, so we're going to envision this being a baking dish or a casserole dish. Let's pretend this is a casserole dish. I'm going to, and it's this deep. I'm going to put the stone almost to the top of that pot. I mean, you don't want them falling out of the pot. But you're going to put it almost to the top of that casserole dish. Then you're going to fill the water just below that, and then take your plant and set it on top of the stones. So it's a huge plant. Uh-huh. Okay. That's good. So if you're getting a plant that's big and it's growing that well, you don't need to do anything. You're getting it right. Are you getting new growth off of it right now?
What she hasn't touched is still growing.
Okay.
She tried to transplant some, and it's not working.
Oh, so you transplanted it and then now it's struggling?
Or some of it.
Some of it's struggling. Okay, so that could be a couple different things. My rule of thumb, so there's a lot of people that are like, by the book. If you're by the book, you repot your plants every spring. I don't do that. If my plants are happy, I let them be. Leave them alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it, is my mentality. I mean, if they're happy, just let them be happy. If you notice, this one pretty soon is going to want repotted. This particular plant's an anthurium. They like to be tightly root bound. So some plants don't want to be root bound. Anthurium do not mind it. So I don't need to repot it yet. Now, if this was a different type of plant, say a chef lyra that she was talking about, or an African violets aren't really going to do this, but some other variety of plant that gets root bound, it's not necessarily going to be able to pull up enough water. There's not enough soil for it to be make water accessible for it. I guess I'm getting close to time. So if there's nothing wrong with it, just let it be. Just let it grow. So when you transplant a plant, it creates a type of shock. When you buy a new plant and bring it to your home, it creates a type of shock. So it's basically they need to acclimate to the new environment. So they were all cozy, they had their roots all tucked into everything, and they were comfortable. You pulled it out, they probably got most of that soil off, which is then going to make the plant, I mean, if a plant can be confused, it confuses it. You know, you're changing something for it when it was happy where it was, you're changing it. So now it's still gonna have to adjust to the new soil, adjust to the new type, probably a different type of soil if they didn't use the one that was already directly in it. There's just an adjustment period that they have to go through. Yeah. Yes? Uh-huh. Orchids. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And they're all dried up, they haven't fallen up.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do now? Do I
So she's asking, she got an orchid, all the flowers dried up, but they didn't fall off yet. So I would wait, let them fall off. If you can brush the flowers off, if they're ready to fall off, you can do that. Don't trim back that spike. If the spike on an orchid is still green, leave it. If you cut it off, it will never rebloom. So you're gonna wanna wait until that stem dries back and turns brown. So it looks like a stick. If it's a stick, you can cut that off. So orchids generally bloom, most of them once a year, and generally in the winter, because they like a cold drop. So once your blooms are done, put it somewhere where at night it's gonna get colder. Windowsills are excellent for that, especially if you have a nice drafty window. So it gets warmer during the day, it warms the plant up. That cold drop is what's gonna trigger the regrowth of the flowers. But yeah, if you trim that stem back before, yeah, I would wait until it turns and it looks like a stick. And you want the stem to look dead.
All the way
And then
down.
about that far down. Yeah, you would want to leave a nub about that far from the base of the plant. So if this is a soil line, yeah, if this is your soil line, you leave about that much. That doesn't matter. No, once it's dead, it doesn't matter how you cut it. You could snap it in your hand if you wanted to. If you can, it will snap. The new growth will start usually the following, like almost a year later, and then it will grow off of not the same spot. It'll usually grow off of. I have some orchids, but I'm not an orchid expert. There's some the Orchid Society would probably be like, right now with whatever they're saying. So I have some. I can get them to rebloom, but I'm not by any means like an orchid expert. They can be. Don't water them with ice. That's the other thing. Yeah, don't use the ice. You know, again, replicating the environment they were from. They don't get ice in nature. So, yeah. So I think we're done. Okay. Perfect. That works for me. I will be over there if you guys have any questions.